My husband's phone buzzed at 2:47 a.m., and when I saw my mother-in-law's name on the screen, I knew our marriage was about to explode. The text message that would destroy 8 years of manipulation was accidentally sent to the wrong number. Instead of sending it to her sister, Patricia Rivera accidentally sent it to her son Tyler, my husband. The message read, "Mission accomplished. Madison finally snapped at Tyler tonight. I've been working on destroying their marriage for 8 years and she's finally breaking down. Tyler will come crawling back to mommy soon. The poison I've been dripping in his ear about her is finally working." The first revelation hit like a sledgehammer to my chest. I was Madison Cooper, 31 years old, sitting in my dark bedroom at nearly 3 a.m., reading a text message that revealed my mother-in-law had been systematically destroying my marriage since the day Tyler and I got engaged. The second discovery twisted the knife even deeper. Tyler was sound asleep beside me, completely unaware that his phone contained evidence of the most elaborate family sabotage campaign I'd ever imagined. His mother hadn't just disliked me, she'd been conducting psychological warfare against our relationship for nearly a decade. The third confession made my hands shake so violently I almost dropped the phone. But what made my blood run cold wasn't just the confession. It was the timestamp on previous messages I started scrolling through. Hundreds of texts between Patricia and Tyler, dating back years, all carefully designed to plant seeds of doubt about me, our marriage, and my love for him. But what I found that night changed everything. "Tyler thinks Madison doesn't really love him anymore," read one message from 6 months ago. "I told him how you looked at your ex-husband at the grocery store last week. He's starting to question whether you're faithful." There had been no ex-husband at any grocery store. There had been no look. Patricia had fabricated the entire story to make Tyler suspicious of me. "I mentioned to Tyler how you never cook his favorite meals anymore," read another message from 3 months ago. "He said he's been feeling unappreciated at home. I suggested maybe you don't care about his happiness." Tyler's favorite meal was my grandmother's pot roast recipe. I cooked it for him every Sunday. But somehow Patricia had convinced him I'd stopped caring about what made him happy. My intuition was right, even if it hurt. Message after message revealed the scope of Patricia's manipulation. She'd been rewriting history, fabricating incidents, and gaslighting both of us to create problems that had never existed. I told Tyler that Madison seemed distant during our family dinner last week. Read a message from just 2 weeks ago. He asked if I thought she was having second thoughts about the marriage. I said maybe she's outgrowing him. That family dinner had been pleasant. I'd helped Patricia in the kitchen, complimented her cooking, and spent 2 hours listening to Tyler's childhood stories with genuine interest. But in Patricia's retelling, I'd been cold and disconnected. From that moment on, nothing felt the same. I scrolled further back, finding messages that traced the deterioration of our marriage to specific lies Patricia had planted in Tyler's mind. "Madison looked uncomfortable when you talked about having children," she'd texted Tyler after our anniversary dinner. "Maybe she doesn't want the same future you do." We'd spent that entire evening discussing baby names and laughing about what kind of parents we'd be. I'd never been more excited about starting a family. But Patricia had somehow twisted Tyler's memory of that conversation into doubt about my maternal desires. And in that instant, my plan began to form. But the most devastating message was from just 3 days ago, after the fight that had nearly ended our marriage. "I'm proud of you for standing up to Madison tonight," Patricia had written. "She needed to hear some hard truths. Maybe now she'll realize she's been taking you for granted. If she really loved you, she wouldn't have gotten so defensive." The fight had been about nothing, a misunderstanding about dinner plans that had somehow escalated into accusations about respect and appreciation. Tyler had said things that had cut me to the core, questioning my commitment and love. Now I understood where those words had come from. They hadn't come from Tyler's heart. They'd come from 8 years of his mother's psychological manipulation, As I sat in our bedroom, reading evidence of the most calculated destruction of a marriage I'd ever witnessed, I realized the most horrifying truth of all. Tyler didn't know he was being manipulated. He thought his doubts about our marriage were his own organic feelings, naturally developed through his observations of our relationship. He had no idea his mother had been programming him to destroy the woman he loved. And tomorrow morning, when he woke up, I was going to show him exactly what his precious mother had been doing to both of us. The woman who'd raised him to be loving and trusting had spent 8 years teaching him to distrust his own wife. And her confession was about to destroy her relationship with her son forever. Let me tell you who I was before Patricia Rivera turned psychological manipulation into a twisted art form. I was Madison Cooper, 31 years old, a pediatric nurse who specialized in helping sick children feel brave during their darkest moments. I was the woman who'd fallen in love with Tyler Rivera's kindness, his loyalty to family, and his genuine belief that people were fundamentally good. I was living what I thought was a challenging but normal marriage, completely unaware that my biggest relationship problems were being artificially manufactured by my husband's mother. The first warning sign I'd completely ignored. Tyler and I met 9 years ago at a hospital charity event. I was working the night shift in pediatric ICU, and he was there representing his construction company's donation to the children's wing renovation. He was 29, hardworking, and had the kind of smile that made you forget you'd been on your feet for 12 hours. "You're the nurse who convinced my nephew Jake that his surgery would make him a superhero," he'd said, approaching my booth with a cup of coffee and genuine curiosity. "Jake's been telling everyone he's going to be Iron Man when his heart gets fixed." That nephew, Jake, had been one of my patients. 8 years old, congenital heart defect, terrified of the surgery that would save his life. I'd spent hours with him, creating elaborate stories about how his new heart valve was actually superhero technology that would make him stronger than ever. The second moment when love blinded me to danger. "Your nephew is going to be just fine," I'd told Tyler that night. "And he really will be stronger when this is over. Sometimes the best superheroes are the ones who've been through the toughest battles." Tyler had asked me to coffee the next week. Then dinner. Then a weekend trip to his family's lake house, where I'd first met Patricia Rivera and thought I was meeting the woman who'd raised the man of my dreams. The third trap I'd walked into willingly. Patricia had seemed perfect that first weekend. Warm, welcoming, the kind of mother-in-law who cooked elaborate meals and insisted I take leftovers home. She'd shown me Tyler's baby photos, told embarrassing childhood stories, and made me feel like I was already part of the family. "Tyler's never brought anyone to the lake house before," she'd said, pulling me aside while Tyler grilled burgers. "He must really love you. I can see why. You're exactly the kind of woman I always hoped he'd find." But what I found that night changed everything. We got engaged 2 years later in the same hospital where we'd met, right in front of the children's wing that Tyler's company had helped renovate. Patricia cried happy tears, hugged me like a daughter, and immediately started planning the wedding of my dreams. But that's when the subtle manipulation began, so carefully crafted that I didn't recognize it as sabotage. "Madison, honey, are you sure you want this ceremony in your hometown?" Patricia had asked during our first wedding planning session. "Tyler's family has been in this community for generations. It might hurt people's feelings if you don't get married here." She'd been right, of course. Tyler's family was deeply rooted in their small Arizona town, and I'd wanted them to feel comfortable and included. So we'd moved the wedding to Arizona, away from my family and friends, making me dependent on Patricia's local connections for everything. My intuition was right, even if it hurt. "I know you want to keep working as a nurse," Patricia had said during another planning conversation. "But Tyler makes good money in construction. Wouldn't it be nice to have more time for your marriage? Maybe think about switching to part-time?" Again, her suggestion had seemed reasonable, even loving. A mother-in-law who wanted her son's wife to be happy and stress-free. So I'd reduced my hours at the hospital, making myself financially dependent on Tyler and creating more time for Patricia to access our relationship. Tyler mentioned you've been tired lately, she'd say during her frequent visits. Are you sure you're getting enough sleep? Maybe you should see a doctor. You've seemed a little distant. These comments always came after perfectly normal weeks, but Patricia's concerned observations made me second-guess my own energy levels, my mood, my connection to my husband. From that moment on, nothing felt the same. For 8 years, Patricia had been the concerned mother-in-law who just wanted her son to be happy. She'd offer helpful suggestions, express gentle worries, and create an atmosphere where Tyler and I were constantly questioning whether we were good enough for each other. But now, reading her confession texts, I understood the truth. Patricia hadn't been concerned about our marriage. She'd been actively destroying it, one carefully planted seed of doubt at a time. And the woman I'd trusted as a second mother had been my greatest enemy all along. And in that instant, my plan began to form. But the most devastating realization wasn't about Patricia's betrayal. It was about Tyler's innocence. My husband had been manipulated just as much as I had, turned into a weapon against his own wife without ever realizing what was happening. Tomorrow morning, when I showed him his mother's texts, I wasn't just going to expose Patricia's lies. I was going to shatter Tyler's entire understanding of the woman who'd raised him, and I wasn't sure our marriage would survive the truth. The next morning, I made Tyler's favorite breakfast, blueberry pancakes with real maple syrup, and waited for him to notice that his phone had been moved. He came downstairs at 7:15 a.m., freshly showered and dressed for work, completely unaware that his world was about to implode over coffee and pancakes. "Morning, beautiful," he said, kissing my cheek and reaching for his phone. "Smells amazing in here." The first crack in Tyler's programmed reality. "Tyler," I said, my voice steadier than I felt, "we need to talk about your mother." He looked up from checking his messages, immediately defensive. "What about her?" "Madison, if this is about Sunday dinner again, she was just trying to help when she suggested you might want to cook something different. Read your text messages from last night." The second moment when truth shattered illusion. Tyler's face shifted from defensive to confused. "What text messages? I was asleep by 10? "The one from your mother, sent at 2:47 a.m. I watched as Tyler scrolled through his phone, his expression changing from confusion to shock to horror as he read Patricia's accidental confession. "What the hell?" he whispered, reading the message again. "This can't be real. My mother she wouldn't do this." The third blow that destroyed 8 years of lies. "Tyler, scroll up. Read the others." For the next 20 minutes, I watched my husband discover that his mother had been systematically poisoning our marriage. His face went pale, then red, then pale again as he read message after message documenting Patricia's manipulation campaign. But what I found that night changed everything. "The grocery store thing," he said suddenly, looking up at me with devastated eyes. "She told me you were flirting with some guy at the grocery store. I've been worried about that for months." "There was no guy, Tyler. There was no flirting. Your mother made it up." "The cooking thing. She said you'd stopped making my favorite meals because you didn't care about making me happy anymore." "I cook pot roast every Sunday. I've never stopped." "The anniversary dinner. She said you looked uncomfortable when I talked about kids. My intuition was right, even if it hurt." "Tyler, that was the night we picked out baby names. I've never been more excited about anything in my life." Each revelation hit him like a physical blow. Tyler set down his phone and put his head in his hands. "Madison, I'm so sorry. I've been thinking that maybe we were growing apart. That maybe you weren't happy with me anymore. But it was all her? 8 years of it." 8 years of her making me doubt you, making me doubt us. From that moment on, nothing felt the same. Tyler stood up abruptly, pacing to our kitchen window. I need to confront her. I need to ask her why she would do this to us. Tyler, wait. We need to think about this carefully. Think about what? My mother has been sabotaging my marriage for 8 years. She's been lying to me, manipulating me, making me question the woman I love more than anything in the world. But I could see something else in Tyler's eyes. Not just anger at his mother, but terror at what this meant about his own judgment. Tyler, this isn't your fault, isn't it? I believed her. Every lie, every manipulation, every poisonous suggestion. I let her convince me that my wife didn't love me. And in that instant, my plan began to form. She's your mother. You trusted her because you love her. That's not a character flaw, Tyler. That's what makes you a good person. But Tyler wasn't listening. He was scrolling through more messages, finding deeper layers of Patricia's deception. Look at this, he said, showing me his phone. From 3 years ago. She told me you seemed emotionally distant after your father's funeral. She suggested maybe grief was making you pull away from our marriage. I remembered that conversation. Tyler had seemed oddly cold in the weeks after my father's death, less supportive than I'd expected. I'd thought he was uncomfortable with my grief. She told me grief changes people, Tyler continued, his voice hollow. That some people never recover from loss, and maybe you'd never be the same. She planted the idea that you were broken. Tyler. My father's funeral, he said suddenly, when my dad died 2 years ago. What did my mother tell you about how I was handling it? I thought back to those awful weeks. She said you needed space to grieve, that I should give you time to process without trying to comfort you too much. She told me you seemed relieved that he was gone. She said you never really liked him and were probably happy not to deal with him anymore. The manipulation had been perfect. Patricia had used our grief to drive us apart, making each of us feel unsupported by the other during our most vulnerable moments. Tyler, we need to expose her, not just to us, but to your whole family. What do you mean? I mean your mother has been playing psychological games with our marriage for 8 years. We need to make sure she can never do this to anyone else. Tyler stared at me, and for the first time since I'd known him, I saw real anger in his eyes. You're right. It's time my family learned exactly who Patricia Rivera really is. But neither of us was prepared for what would happen when we tried to expose the family matriarch. Because Patricia Rivera hadn't survived 8 years of manipulation without learning how to protect herself. Instead of confronting Patricia immediately, Tyler and I decided to spend the week gathering evidence. If we were going to expose 8 years of manipulation to his family, we needed more than just text messages. Tyler started paying attention to his mother's behavior with new eyes, and what he discovered made him question everything he'd ever believed about the woman who raised him, the first piece of evidence that proved our suspicions. She's coming over for dinner tonight. Tyler told me that Tuesday. I want you to act normal while I watch how she operates. Patricia arrived at 6 p.m. with a casserole and her usual warm smile, completely unaware that we'd discovered her confession text. Madison, honey, you look tired, were the first words out of her mouth. Are you getting enough sleep? Tyler, has she been staying up too late again? You know how nurses overwork themselves. The second revelation about her manipulation methods. I watched Tyler's face as he heard his mother's concern, with new understanding. This wasn't maternal care. This was Patricia planting the suggestion that I was unreliable, unhealthy, a burden on her son. Madison's been fine, Mom, Tyler said carefully. Actually, she's been sleeping great. Oh, well, maybe it's just the lighting in here, Patricia continued smoothly. You know, Tyler, you've been looking a little stressed yourself lately. Is everything okay at work? Or is it Other things? The way she said other things while glancing meaningfully at me was masterful manipulation. Without directly criticizing me, Patricia was suggesting I was the source of Tyler's stress, the third pattern that revealed her master plan. Work's been fine, Mom. Marriage is fine too. Of course, honey. I'm sure Madison is doing her best. It's just that marriage takes constant effort from both people, and sometimes. She trailed off meaningfully, then smiled brightly. But I'm sure you two are handling everything perfectly. But what I found that night changed everything. During dinner, Patricia deployed every manipulation technique she'd been using for years, but now we could see them clearly. She asked about my work schedule, then commented to Tyler about how difficult it must be to maintain a marriage when one person works such demanding hours. She praised my cooking while suggesting to Tyler that I seemed overwhelmed by domestic responsibilities. She brought up Tyler's cousin's recent promotion, then wondered aloud whether I felt secure about our financial future or if I was putting pressure on Tyler to advance faster. Each comment was carefully crafted to sound supportive while actually undermining our confidence in each other. My intuition was right, even if it hurt. But the most revealing moment came when Patricia thought Tyler was out of earshot. "Madison, honey, can I give you some advice?" she said while Tyler was in the bathroom. "I've noticed Tyler seems a little distant lately. Men need to feel appreciated, you know? Maybe you could try cooking his favorite meals more often or showing more interest in his work." I was cooking Tyler's favorite meals constantly, and I'd always been interested in his construction projects. But Patricia was gaslighting me into believing I was failing as a wife. "I think Tyler and I are doing fine," I said carefully. "Of course you are, dear. I just know my son, and when he gets quiet like this, it usually means he's not feeling fulfilled at home." From that moment on, nothing felt the same. When Tyler returned, Patricia seamlessly shifted back to warm, supportive mother-in-law mode. After she left, Tyler and I sat in stunned silence. "Did you hear what she said to me while you were in the bathroom?" I asked. "Every word. She's been doing this for years, hasn't she? Making each of us think the other one is the problem." That week, Tyler started documenting every interaction with his mother. Phone calls where she'd express concern about our marriage, text messages where she'd plant seeds of doubt, family gatherings where she'd make subtle comments designed to create tension. And in that instant, my plan began to form. The most damning evidence came from Tyler's sister, Rachel, who visited Thursday night. "Tyler seems stressed lately," Patricia had told Rachel earlier that day. "I'm worried about his marriage. Madison's a sweet girl, but I don't think she understands how to make Tyler happy. She's very focused on her career, you know." Rachel, who'd always liked me, was confused by this assessment. "But Madison seems great with Tyler, and he's always talking about how proud he is of her nursing work." "Oh, I'm sure she means well," Patricia had replied. "But sometimes career women don't know how to prioritize their marriages. I just worry that Tyler's going to wake up one day and realize he's not getting what he needs at home." When Rachel told us about this conversation, Tyler's anger reached a new level. "She's poisoning the entire family against Madison," he said. "She's making everyone think our marriage is failing so that when it does fail, everyone will blame Madison instead of her." But we still weren't prepared for what we discovered when Tyler decided to check Patricia's social media accounts. The private family Facebook group where Patricia had been sharing concerns about our marriage with extended family for years. Posts about how worried she was about Tyler's happiness. Photos of family gatherings with captions about how I seemed uncomfortable or distant. Comments responding to relatives' questions about our marriage with carefully worded suggestions that we were going through a rough patch and Tyler might need extra family support. Patricia Rivera hadn't just been manipulating our marriage in private. She'd been conducting a public relations campaign against me for years, ensuring that when our marriage collapsed, the entire family would see her as the wise mother who'd tried to warn everyone. The woman who'd seemed like a loving mother-in-law was actually a criminal mastermind of psychological warfare. And tomorrow, we were going to expose her to everyone. We decided to confront Patricia at the weekly family dinner, in front of Tyler's sister Rachel, his brother Jake, and their spouses. If we were going to expose 8 years of manipulation, we needed witnesses. Sunday dinner at Patricia's house had always been a Rivera family tradition. Everyone brought a dish, children played in the backyard, and Patricia held court as the beloved family matriarch. Today, that tradition was going to explode. The first escalation that showed her desperation. "Tyler, Madison, so good to see you." Patricia greeted us at the door with her usual warm smile. "Madison, honey, you brought salad again? I hope you didn't overwork yourself making it." The comment was classic Patricia, seemingly supportive while actually suggesting I was either lazy, store-bought salad, or dramatic, overworked by simple cooking. "Actually, Mom," Tyler said, his voice steady but cold, "Madison makes incredible salads. She grows half the vegetables herself in our garden." Patricia's smile flickered. Tyler had never contradicted her subtle criticisms before, this second bomb that detonated her world. During dinner, we waited for the perfect moment. It came when Patricia started her usual routine of planting doubts about our marriage. "Tyler's been working so hard lately," she said to the table, directing her comment toward Rachel. "I hope he's getting enough support at home. Marriage is such hard work, especially when both people have demanding careers." "Mom," Tyler said quietly, setting down his fork. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course, honey." "Why did you text me at 2:47 a.m. on Tuesday telling your sister that you've been poisoning my marriage for 8 years? The third explosion that shattered everything. The table went silent. Patricia's face went white, then red, then white again. What are you talking about, Tyler?" Tyler pulled out his phone and read the text message aloud. "Mission accomplished. Madison finally snapped at Tyler tonight. I've been working on destroying their marriage for 8 years, and she's finally breaking down. Tyler will come crawling back to Mommy soon. The poison I've been dripping in his ear about her is finally working. But what I found that night changed everything." Rachel gasped. Jake dropped his beer. Tyler's sister-in-law Emma stared at Patricia in shock. "Tyler, that's not—" "I never sent that message," Patricia stammered. "Mom, it's from your phone. To my phone, with your contact information." "Someone must have hacked my phone. Tyler, you can't seriously believe I would—" "Show them the others," I said quietly. Tyler scrolled through months of text messages, reading Patricia's manipulation campaign aloud to his horrified family. The grocery store lie, the cooking fabrication, the anniversary dinner distortion. Message after message documenting 8 years of systematic psychological warfare against our marriage. My intuition was right, even if it hurt. "This is insane," Rachel said, staring at her mother. "Mom, why would you do this to Tyler and Madison?" "I didn't do anything." Patricia's voice was rising, panic creeping in. "Tyler, these messages, they're not real. Someone is trying to destroy our family." "Mom," Jake said quietly, "these are your words. Your phone. Your handwriting style." "But I love Madison. I've always supported their marriage." From that moment on, nothing felt the same. Tyler stood up from the table, his face a mask of controlled fury. "Mom, for 8 years you've been lying to me about my wife. You made me doubt Madison's love, her commitment, her character. You fabricated stories to make me suspicious of her. You used my grief over Dad's death to drive us apart. Tyler, I was protecting you." "From what? From being happy? From being loved?" Patricia's composure finally cracked completely. "From being controlled by a woman who doesn't understand you," she screamed. "From a marriage that was never right for you. Madison doesn't love you the way I do. She doesn't know you the way I do." And in that instant, my plan began to form. The admission hung in the air like poison gas. Patricia had just confessed to everything in front of Tyler's entire family. "Mom," Rachel said, her voice horrified, "that's not love. That's sick. I raised Tyler. I know what's best for him. I've spent 33 years making sure he was happy and safe, and I wasn't going to let some nurse destroy everything I built." "What you built?" Tyler's voice was deadly quiet. "Mom, you didn't build my marriage. You've been trying to destroy it. Because it was wrong for you. Madison doesn't appreciate you. She doesn't cook for you. She doesn't take care of you the way a wife should. Madison cooks for me constantly. She takes incredible care of me. She loves me more than anyone ever has, including you." Patricia's face twisted with rage and desperation. "She doesn't love you like I love you. No one will ever love you like I love you." The room fell silent as everyone processed what Patricia had just revealed. This wasn't about protecting Tyler from a bad marriage. This was about a mother who couldn't let go of her son, who saw any woman in his life as competition for his love and loyalty. Patricia Rivera hadn't been trying to save Tyler from me. She'd been trying to save Tyler for herself. And her confession had just destroyed her relationship with her son forever. "Get out," Tyler said quietly. "What?" "Get out of my life. All of you, please leave Mom's house. Mom, I want you to stay away from me and Madison until you get professional help." "Tyler, you can't mean that." "I mean every word. You've spent 8 years trying to destroy my marriage. You've manipulated me, lied to me, and tried to turn me against the woman I love. That stops now." As we left Patricia's house, I realized something that chilled me to the bone. This confrontation wasn't the end of Patricia's manipulation. It was the beginning of her revenge. Within 24 hours of our family dinner confrontation, Patricia Rivera launched the most sophisticated damage control campaign I'd ever witnessed. She called every family member, friend, and acquaintance she could reach, spinning a story that transformed her from manipulative mother-in-law to concerned victim of our unstable marriage. The first wave of her counterattack. Tyler's phone started ringing at 6 a.m. Monday morning. His Aunt Carmen, calling from Phoenix. "Tyler, your mother is beside herself," Carmen said without preamble. "She told me about the terrible fight at dinner yesterday. Honey, I'm worried about you and Madison. Patricia says Madison has been very unstable lately, and you've been under tremendous stress." Tyler's face went white as he listened to his aunt repeat Patricia's revised version of events. "Aunt Carmen, that's not what happened. Your mother showed me some concerning text messages between you two. Tyler, if Madison is having mental health issues, you need to get her help before she hurts herself or someone else." The second phase of her brilliant manipulation. We soon discovered that Patricia had been busy all night, crafting a narrative where my confrontation about her manipulation became evidence of my mental instability. The text messages she'd shown family members were carefully edited screenshots that made my reasonable responses to her lies look like erratic, angry outbursts. "She made me look crazy," I told Tyler after the fifth family member called with concerns about my mental health. Patricia turned her confession of sabotage into proof that I'm having a breakdown. The third stroke of her criminal genius. But Patricia's most brilliant move was recruiting Tyler's deceased father as a character witness. "Your father always worried about Madison," she told Tyler's cousin Maria. "He used to tell me privately that he didn't think she was stable enough for Tyler. He saw signs that we all missed. I wish he was here to help Tyler through this difficult time." But what I found that night changed everything. Tyler's father had never said anything negative about me. In fact, his final conversation with Tyler before his death had been about how proud he was of Tyler's marriage, and how much he loved having me as a daughter-in-law. But dead men can't contradict lies, and Patricia was using her deceased husband's reputation to add credibility to her character assassination campaign. Within 48 hours, Patricia had successfully convinced half of Tyler's extended family that I was mentally unstable, emotionally abusive, and possibly dangerous. The evidence of her 8-year manipulation campaign became proof that I was a master manipulator who had somehow fabricated months of text messages to frame an innocent mother. My intuition was right, even if it hurt. "How is this possible?" Tyler asked after his brother Jake called to express concern about our troubled marriage. "How can people look at clear evidence of Mom's manipulation and decide that Madison is the problem?" "Because your mother is a professional," I said. "She's been doing this for decades, Tyler. We were just her most recent victims." That's when we decided to dig deeper into Patricia's history. We started with Tyler's father's family, people who'd known Patricia since she was young. "Your mother was always intense about relationships," Tyler's paternal aunt revealed during a careful phone conversation. "When she was dating your father, she had some concerning behaviors with his female friends. From that moment on, nothing felt the same." "What kind of behaviors?" "She would spread rumors about girls who got too close to your father. Nothing you could prove. But somehow every woman in your father's social circle would end up with reputation problems after Patricia took an interest in them." We discovered that Tyler's father had lost several close friendships during his engagement to Patricia. Friends who'd mysteriously become concerned about his relationship choices, who'd heard troubling stories about his fiancée's behavior from reliable sources. "Your father's best friend Michael stopped speaking to him right before the wedding," another relative told us. "Patricia had somehow convinced Michael that your father had become controlling and possessive. Michael felt like he needed to distance himself for his own safety. And in that instant, my plan began to form. The pattern became clear. Patricia had been using psychological manipulation to isolate the men in her life from other relationships for decades. Tyler's father had lost friends, but he'd gained a wife who was completely devoted to him. Tyler's previous girlfriends had all ended their relationships after becoming uncomfortable with Tyler's family dynamics, specifically his mother's intense involvement in his personal life. And I had nearly become Patricia's latest success story. But unlike Tyler's father and his previous girlfriends, Tyler and I had discovered Patricia's methods before they could completely destroy our relationship. "Tyler," I said, showing him what we'd uncovered about his mother's history. "This isn't about you or me or our marriage. This is about your mother's psychological condition. She can't tolerate sharing the love of the men in her life. So what do we do? She's already convinced half my family that you're dangerous and I'm being manipulated. We prove it. We document everything. And we make sure Patricia Rivera never has the opportunity to destroy another relationship." But what we discovered next made us realize that Patricia's campaign against our marriage was just the beginning. She was already targeting her next victim, Tyler's teenage nephew, whose girlfriend had recently become concerned about their relationship after some conversations with his loving grandmother. Patricia Rivera wasn't just a manipulative mother-in-law, she was a serial destroyer of relationships, and she was training the next generation to continue her work. That week, Tyler and I made the hardest decision of our marriage. We were going to wage psychological warfare against a master manipulator, using her own weapons against her. We couldn't out-manipulate Patricia Rivera, but we could out-document her. The first step in building our battle plan. "We're going to create an evidence archive," I told Tyler as we sat in our living room, surrounded by printed screenshots, phone records, and witness statements. Everything Patricia has ever done to manipulate our marriage or anyone else's relationship gets documented and preserved. Tyler looked at the growing pile of evidence with a mixture of determination and sadness. He was preparing to destroy his mother's reputation to save other people from her psychological abuse. "Madison, Are you sure about this? Once we expose her publicly, there's no going back. She'll never forgive us. The second realization that sealed our commitment. Tyler, your mother has been destroying relationships for decades. Your father lost friends because of her manipulation. Your previous girlfriends left because she made them uncomfortable. Your nephew is already showing signs that she's working on him. We'd discovered that Tyler's 16-year-old nephew, David, had been receiving advice from Patricia about his first serious girlfriend. The same subtle poisoning that had been used on our marriage was now being deployed against two teenagers who were just learning how to love each other. The third piece of evidence that horrified us. If we don't stop her now, she's going to ruin David's ability to trust relationships, and then she'll move on to the next victim, and the next. We spent the week building our case like criminal prosecutors. We interviewed Tyler's father's old friends, documenting how Patricia had systematically eliminated his social support system during their engagement and early marriage. We tracked down Tyler's ex-girlfriends, carefully explaining our situation and asking if they'd experienced any concerning interactions with his mother. But what I found that night changed everything. The stories we uncovered were chilling in their consistency. Jessica, Tyler's college girlfriend, remembered Patricia expressing concern about their relationship's intensity and suggesting that Tyler needed space to figure out what he really wanted. Amanda, whom Tyler had dated for 2 years in his late 20s, recalled Patricia mentioning that Tyler had seemed unhappy and stressed whenever Amanda was around, and wondering if the relationship was adding pressure to Tyler's life. Each woman had broken up with Tyler believing that she was being considerate of his needs, not realizing she'd been manipulated into ending relationships that Tyler had wanted to continue. I thought I was doing Tyler a favor by stepping back, Jessica told us during a careful phone conversation. His mother convinced me that he was too polite to admit he wanted out of the relationship. My intuition was right, even if it hurt. But the most damaging evidence came from Tyler's own family. Rachel, Tyler's sister, finally admitted that Patricia had been expressing concerns about my mental health for years, long before any problems had developed in our marriage. Mom would mention that you seemed fragile or overwhelmed, Rachel told us. She'd say things like, "I hope Madison is taking care of herself. Tyler worries about her so much." I thought she was being caring, but now I realize she was planting the idea that you were unstable. Jake, Tyler's brother, revealed that Patricia had tried similar tactics with his wife Emma, expressing concerns about Emma's compatibility with the Rivera family values and wondering if Jake was settling for someone who didn't understand him. The difference was that Emma called Mom out immediately, Jake said. Emma told her that if she had concerns about our relationship, she could address them directly or keep them to herself. From that moment on, nothing felt the same. Emma's direct approach had worked because Patricia couldn't manipulate someone who refused to participate in subtle psychological games. But most people, like Tyler and me, had tried to be respectful and accommodating, giving Patricia the opening she needed to plant her poison. We need to teach other people how to recognize Patricia's tactics, I told Tyler. We need to create a guide for identifying and stopping this kind of manipulation. Tyler agreed, but he was struggling with the emotional weight of exposing his mother's psychological abuse. Madison, I keep thinking about all the times she hugged me after she'd been talking to you, telling me she was worried about our marriage. She would comfort me about problems she had created. And in that instant, my plan began to form. Tyler, that's exactly why we have to do this. Patricia doesn't just destroy relationships. She makes her victims grateful for her support while she's destroying them. We decided to approach family members one by one, sharing our evidence and asking them to watch for Patricia's manipulation tactics in their own relationships. But we started with David, Tyler's nephew, who needed immediate protection from his grandmother's interference. "David," Tyler said when we invited the teenager over for dinner, Has Grandma Patricia given you any advice about your girlfriend lately? David's face immediately became guarded. Why? Because we've discovered that Grandma has been giving relationship advice that's designed to destroy relationships, not help them. We spent 2 hours showing David the evidence of Patricia's manipulation campaign, teaching him to recognize the subtle ways she planted doubt and created problems where none existed. She told me that Sarah seemed possessive and that I should make sure I wasn't losing my independence, David admitted. She said young love was beautiful, but I needed to be careful not to make promises I couldn't keep. David's girlfriend Sarah was sweet, supportive, and completely non-possessive. Patricia had been laying groundwork to destroy their relationship exactly the way she'd tried to destroy ours. But unlike Tyler and me, David was going to be prepared for his grandmother's psychological warfare. And armed with knowledge, he was going to become our secret weapon in exposing Patricia Rivera to the rest of the family. The transformation began with David, Tyler's 16-year-old nephew, who became our undercover agent in Patricia's ongoing manipulation campaign. Armed with knowledge about his grandmother's tactics, David started documenting every conversation where Patricia tried to plant seeds of doubt about his relationship with Sarah, the first crack in Patricia's perfect manipulation system. She does exactly what you said she would, David reported after a family barbecue. Grandma pulled me aside and said she was concerned that Sarah was getting too serious too fast. She asked if I felt pressured to spend all my time with her. David and Sarah had been dating for 4 months and saw each other twice a week. There was no pressure, no excessive seriousness, and no cause for concern. Patricia was manufacturing problems to solve. What did you tell her? Tyler asked. I said Sarah and I were happy, and I asked Grandma why she thought there was a problem. She got flustered and said she just wanted me to be careful. The second sign of her growing desperation. When direct manipulation didn't work on David, Patricia escalated to involving other family members. She told my mom that she was worried about me, David continued. She said I seemed different since I started dating Sarah, and maybe Mom should talk to me about maintaining balance in my life. But David's mother, Rachel, now knew about Patricia's manipulation tactics. Instead of approaching David with concerns, Rachel called Tyler to report Patricia's attempted interference, the third proof that we were winning. Mom's trying to recruit allies to pressure David, Tyler told me after Rachel's call. But the family members who know the truth about her are comparing notes instead of falling for her manipulation. Within 2 weeks, we had documented evidence of Patricia attempting to sabotage David's relationship using the exact same tactics she'd used on our marriage. But what I found that night changed everything. But Patricia's most revealing moment came when she realized her manipulation wasn't working on David. During a family dinner at Jake and Emma's house, Patricia tried a more direct approach. David, honey, I need to tell you something about Sarah, she said, pulling him aside while other family members were cleaning up. I don't want to upset you, but I saw her at the mall last weekend with another boy. They looked very close. David had been with Sarah at the mall that weekend. The other boy was Sarah's cousin, who was visiting from out of state. Patricia had either fabricated the entire story or deliberately misrepresented an innocent family interaction. Grandma, David said calmly, I was with Sarah at the mall. That was her cousin Jake from California. My intuition was right, even if it hurt. Patricia's face went through a series of expressions: surprise, embarrassment, then calculation. Oh, well, maybe I was mistaken, she said smoothly. But David, even if that's true, you should be careful about how much time Sarah spends with other boys. Sometimes girls your age don't understand appropriate boundaries. David recorded this conversation on his phone, capturing Patricia's attempt to recover from being caught in a lie by creating new concerns about Sarah's character. From that moment on, nothing felt the same. Armed with David's recordings and our growing archive of evidence, we began approaching other family members who'd been targeted by Patricia's manipulation. Emma, Jake's wife, had her own collection of Patricia's attempts to undermine her marriage. She'd been keeping a journal of concerning conversations for 3 years, not realizing she was documenting a systematic campaign. Patricia told me that Jake seemed overwhelmed by my career ambitions, Emma shared during a family meeting we'd organized. She suggested I might want to consider whether my job was putting stress on our marriage. Emma was a successful accountant whose career Jake proudly supported. There was no stress, no overwhelm, and no conflict about her professional ambitions. Patricia had invented the problem entirely, and in that instant, my plan began to form. But our most powerful evidence came from an unexpected source, Patricia's own sister, Maria, who finally felt safe enough to speak about decades of concerning behavior. Patricia has been doing this since we were teenagers, Maria revealed during a private conversation with Tyler and me. She destroyed 3 of my relationships in high school by spreading rumors or creating drama. I thought she'd grown out of it. Maria had been Patricia's practice victim, the training ground where she'd perfected her relationship manipulation techniques before unleashing them on Tyler's father, Tyler's girlfriends, and ultimately, our marriage. She can't stand to see other people happy in relationships, Maria continued. I think it reminds her of what she doesn't have. Patricia's love is possessive, controlling. She doesn't want people to be happy. She wants them to need her. With Maria's testimony, David's recordings, Emma's journal, and our archive of text messages, we had assembled a case that painted a clear picture of Patricia Rivera as a serial relationship saboteur. But we still weren't prepared for what happened when Patricia realized her entire family was turning against her. Because a manipulator who's losing control doesn't surrender quietly, they escalate. And Patricia Rivera was about to show us exactly how dangerous a cornered psychological abuser could become. We organized the final confrontation for Patricia's own living room, with every adult family member present as witnesses. Tyler, myself, Rachel, Jake, Emma, David, Maria, and 3 family friends who'd been affected by Patricia's manipulation over the years. Patricia walked into her own intervention completely unprepared for what was waiting for her, the first moment of our final assault. "Mom," Tyler said, as Patricia entered the room and saw the assembled group. "We need to have a conversation about your behavior toward the relationships in this family." Patricia's eyes darted around the room, taking in the serious faces, the prepared notebooks, the obvious coordination of her entire family against her. "What is this?" she asked, her voice already defensive. "This is an intervention," Rachel said firmly. "We're here to address your pattern of manipulating and sabotaging relationships." His second avalanche of damning evidence. Tyler stood up and began reading from our evidence archive. Patricia's text messages, David's recordings, Emma's journal entries, Maria's testimony about decades of relationship sabotage. With each piece of evidence, Patricia's face grew paler and her denials more desperate. "This is ridiculous," she said when Tyler finished reading. "You're all ganging up on me based on misunderstandings and coincidences." "Mom," Jake said quietly, "we have recordings of you lying about Sarah being with another boy at the mall. We have text messages where you admit to poisoning Tyler's marriage. We have witness testimony from multiple family members." The third explosion that destroyed her world. "You're all turning against me," Patricia screamed, her composure finally cracking. "I've devoted my entire life to this family, and this is how you repay me?" "By holding you accountable for psychological abuse?" Emma asked coldly. "Yes, this is exactly how we repay manipulative behavior." Patricia turned to Tyler with desperate eyes. "Tyler, I'm your mother. I gave birth to you, raised you, sacrificed everything for you. How can you let them do this to me?" But what I found that night changed everything. "Mom, you tried to destroy my marriage," Tyler said, his voice steady but filled with pain. For 8 years, you made me doubt the woman I love. You fabricated stories, planted lies, and turned me into a weapon against my own wife. Because I love you. Because I know what's best for you. No, Mom. Because you're sick. The word hung in the air like a diagnosis. Patricia stared at her son, the man she'd manipulated for decades, as he finally named her behavior for what it was. My intuition was right, even if it hurt. I am not sick, Patricia said, her voice dangerously quiet. I am a mother who protects her children from people who don't deserve them. People like Madison? Tyler asked. People like Emma? People like Sarah, who's 16 years old and has never done anything but love David? People who don't understand this family. People who take my children away from me. From that moment on, nothing felt the same. The admission was everything we needed. Patricia had just confessed that she viewed any romantic relationship in her family as theft of her children's love and loyalty. Mom, Rachel said softly, healthy mothers want their children to find love and build their own families. They don't sabotage relationships out of jealousy. I am not jealous. Then why? David asked, speaking for the first time. Did you try to break up me and Sarah by lying about seeing her with another boy? Patricia turned on her teenage grandson with fury. Because she's not right for you. None of these women are right for any of you. I know my family better than some teenage girl who's just going to break your heart. And in that instant, my plan began to form. Patricia, Maria said, standing up from her chair. You've been saying that about every woman in this family's life for 40 years. At what point do you consider that maybe the problem isn't the women? It's you? Patricia whirled on her sister. You've always been jealous of my relationship with my children. I've been terrified of your relationship with your children. Patricia, you're emotionally incestuous. You can't stand to share your son's love with anyone. The psychological term hit the room like a bomb. Emotionally incestuous. The clinical description for a parent who treats their child as a surrogate spouse, demanding exclusive emotional loyalty and sabotaging other relationships. How dare you? Patricia screamed. How dare you suggest something so disgusting? I'm not suggesting anything disgusting, Maria replied calmly. I'm describing unhealthy attachment patterns that you've displayed for decades. Tyler looked at his mother with a mixture of sadness and disgust. Mom, we're going to give you one choice. Get professional help for your psychological issues, or lose contact with this family entirely. You can't make me choose between getting help and seeing my children. We're not making you choose, I said, speaking for the first time during the confrontation. We're telling you the consequences of continuing to abuse the people we love. Patricia stared around the room at her entire family united against her manipulation. Fine, she said, her voice cold with rage. If you all want to believe that loving my children makes me sick, then I guess I'm sick. But don't come crying to me when these relationships fail and you realize I was right all along. Mom, Tyler said sadly, if these relationships fail, it won't be because you were right. It'll be because you sabotaged them. As we left Patricia's house that day, I realized something that both terrified and relieved me. We had successfully exposed a master manipulator and protected the next generation from her psychological abuse. But we had also permanently destroyed Tyler's relationship with his mother. And I wasn't sure if Tyler would ever forgive himself for having to choose between his wife and the woman who'd given him life. 1 year later, I'm sitting in our newly remodeled kitchen, watching Tyler teach his nephew David how to cook his girlfriend Sarah's favorite pasta dish, and I'm amazed by how much healing can happen when toxic people are removed from your life. Patricia Rivera is in therapy now, court-ordered therapy, after she escalated her behavior to stalking and harassment when we refused to allow her back into our lives. The first glimpse of how much damage Patricia had caused. After our family intervention, Patricia had tried everything to regain control. She'd enlisted flying monkeys, distant relatives, and family friends to pressure us into forgiving her. She'd shown up at our house uninvited, demanding to speak with Tyler. She'd even tried to contact my workplace, claiming I was mentally unstable and dangerous to children. The harassment had forced us to seek a restraining order, which led to court-mandated psychological evaluation, which finally resulted in an official diagnosis: narcissistic personality disorder with features of borderline personality disorder. The second revelation about the source of her sickness. The psychologist said Mom has probably been struggling with these issues her entire life, Tyler told me after Patricia's evaluation. She doesn't know how to love people without controlling them. It wasn't an excuse for 8 years of manipulation, but it was an explanation. Patricia Rivera genuinely believed that sabotaging her children's relationships was an act of love, not abuse. The third lesson that changed everything. But the most important lesson I learned wasn't about Patricia's mental illness. It was about the power of speaking truth in the face of gaslighting. Never ignore what your heart tries to tell you. I now tell support groups for family members affected by psychological manipulation. If someone's concern consistently creates problems in your relationships, that's not concern. That's sabotage. But what I found that night changed everything. Tyler and I are stronger now than we ever were before, discovering Patricia's manipulation. Surviving psychological warfare together taught us to trust our own perceptions and each other's love. We've learned to recognize manipulation tactics, the planted doubts, the manufactured concerns, the subtle gaslighting disguised as caring advice. Most importantly, we've learned that healthy families celebrate love, they don't sabotage it. David and Sarah are still together, now 18 and planning for college. Because David recognized his grandmother's manipulation early, their relationship never suffered the doubt and confusion that plagued our marriage for 8 years. My intuition was right, even if it hurt. Sarah makes me happy, David told us recently. When Grandma Patricia tried to make me doubt that, I realized the problem wasn't with Sarah or me. It was with Grandma's inability to see other people's happiness without trying to destroy it. Rachel and Jake's marriages have also strengthened since Patricia's removal from their lives. Without constant, subtle undermining, both couples have been able to focus on building their relationships instead of defending them. Emma, Jake's wife, started a blog about surviving toxic in-laws that now reaches thousands of women dealing with similar manipulation. From that moment on, nothing felt the same. The hardest part for Tyler has been grieving the mother he thought he had, while accepting the reality of the mother he actually had. I keep thinking about all the good memories, he told me last week. Birthday parties, family vacations, the way she took care of me when I was sick. Were any of those moments real? They were real, I assured him. Patricia loves you. She just doesn't know how to love you in a healthy way. Her care for you was genuine, even if her methods were destructive. Tyler has been in individual therapy for 6 months, working through the complex trauma of discovering that parental love and psychological abuse had been intertwined throughout his childhood. And in that instant, my plan began to form. Not a plan for revenge or justice, but a plan for helping other families recognize and escape psychological manipulation before it destroys their relationships. We've started a support network for people dealing with toxic family members, teaching them to identify manipulation tactics and develop healthy boundaries. Intuition is the truth we often silence, I tell the families we work with. If someone consistently makes you doubt your relationships, that person is the problem, not your relationships. The most important thing I've learned is that manipulation thrives in isolation and dies in community. Patricia's power over our marriage came from her ability to make us doubt our own perceptions. When we started comparing her stories with reality, when we brought other family members into the conversation, her lies couldn't survive the scrutiny. Self-love hurts at first, but it heals. Tyler and I tell couples struggling with family interference. It's painful to set boundaries with toxic people, but it's necessary for healthy relationships to survive. If you're reading this and someone in your family consistently creates problems in your relationships, trust your instincts. Document the concerning behavior. Talk to other family members. Seek professional guidance. Your relationship deserves to be protected from people who can't celebrate your happiness. Because in the end, love should feel safe, supportive, and liberating, not controlled, questioned, and sabotaged. Patricia Rivera taught us that the greatest threat to a marriage isn't infidelity or incompatibility. It's family members who disguise psychological abuse as concern. And the strongest defense against manipulation is a community of people who choose truth over comfortable lies. Have you ever dealt with a family member who seemed to undermine your relationships while claiming to care about you? Share your story in the comments below. Every week, we share stories of families who found the courage to stand up to toxic manipulation. Subscribe and hit the notification bell to join our community of people supporting healthy relationships. Sometimes one story can help someone recognize the manipulation in their own family. Share this with someone who needs to hear it.